And with me now is CTV News U.S. political analyst Eric Ham. Eric, thanks so much for joining us, and I wanted to get your thoughts on those comments that we heard right there from Trump, saying he might either let the deal expire or be replaced with a new deal between Canada and Mexico, or separately. Your thoughts on what we heard from the U.S. president?
Well, these are all just not only negotiating tactics, but they're also part of Donald Trump's policy of cruelty, where he certainly wants to make things as uncomfortable as possible, specifically for Canada. And what we're seeing here is, while the CUSMA public hearings are actually taking place in Washington right now, not far from where we are. In fact, today marks the second day that those public meetings will be happening. What we have also heard from the U.S. trade representative, the person who is actually in charge of overseeing those public meetings, he's also indicated that Donald Trump is signaling the possibility of revising, but more likely actually exiting the agreement. And of course, what we know, and the reason for that, is the president is seeking maximum leverage from Canada. And we don't know what that leverage point actually is, but we know when President Donald Trump came into office, he made abundantly clear his goal is to make Canada a state of the United States. And so if Donald Trump believes that this leverage, combined with continuing to make it difficult, particularly on trade and other economic policies, can move Canada in his direction, that's what Donald Trump is attempting to do. And even though these meetings will overwhelmingly showcase not only the importance, but also how beneficial this agreement has been for decades to both sides of the border, Donald Trump isn't listening to that right now at all.
And we've heard the U.S. president.
Okay. So a couple of things. Yeah, Trump has said that he would like to see Canada as part of America, as part of his state. That is true. But we all know that Trump has this art of the deal thing where when he says stuff in terms of what's currently being negotiated, he goes all the way to the 10 and then past it. He goes to 12, he goes to 15, he goes to 20. So that when they eventually settle on an 8 or a 7 or an 11, Trump wins big time. And the people that are on the opposite end of it don't feel like they lost because, hey, at least it didn't become statehood, right? So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. I don't know if Canada would actually become the 51st state right away or right now, but I do think that you're going to start to see more of an economic merger between Canada and America. I do think that's going to happen. And I think that by all the 51st state rhetoric, you're seeing it get blown so far out of proportion that when we do have more of an economic merger, then Canada doesn't feel like they lost. Like, haha, at least we didn't become the 51st state, but this was Trump's plan all along anyways.
Say that before, not just specifically about Canada and Mexico, but that many countries, if not all countries, had been taking advantage of the United States, particularly when it came to trade. Now, if Trump does attempt to split the deal and tries to renegotiate separately with Canada and Mexico, what could that mean for the Canadian side of the deal?
Not just the Canadian side, but I think what we will see is just a much, much worse agreement, both for Canada, for the United States, and also for Mexico. What we have seen over 60 years has been economic integration where both sides of the border have benefited immensely. In fact, if you look at the auto industry, which in the United States accounts for nearly 10% of GDP, so we're talking about a massive economic engine. Right now, we know that billions of dollars a day in parts and manufacturing across the U.S. and Canada. And so if the president is now looking at reshaping that agreement, we could see where the deal could have an adverse impact not only on workers, but also on companies and, more importantly, on consumers as well.
CTV News U.S. political analyst Eric Ham.
I mean, something's going to happen because our manufacturing sector, our auto sectors are being completely decimated across the board, and it's just not sustainable right now. It really isn't. America is taking so much from Canada. Canada's left with subsidies up the wazoo, and we just can't sustain it. We're not bringing in the revenues, but we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. In terms of the most recent one with Algoma Steel, well, let's take a look here at what CTV has to say about this, because they just laid off 1,000 workers because it's not sustainable to operate in Canada.
Big question here. Should the federal and Ontario governments have approved the Algoma loan, knowing layoffs were planned as part of this massive restructuring that had to be moved earlier because of the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs?
I don't think that anybody who's been following the saga of Donald Trump's tariffs doubts that the whole operation at Algoma could have shut down if it were not for government intervention. I'm not a big fan, by the way, of governments just deciding that taxpayers' dollars get thrown here or there. But don't forget, with regard to the steel industry, we were talking mostly about loan guarantees. They have to have a bank willing to lend them the money, but the government would be there as backstop and in case it couldn't be paid back. Our steel industry is going through the same thing that our aluminum industry is going through. They're being hit hard by Trump's tariffs, and I think that the government did the responsible thing. But again, it becomes a political football. I see nothing in the attack by Pierre Poilievre that would say how they could have saved the jobs that are remaining. It is an absolute tragedy that 1,000 families in the Sault Ste. Marie area are going to be heading into the Christmas holidays with a real fear that they're going to lose their job in March. But what was the option? If the government didn't help, then there would have been maybe another 1,500 jobs lost. Is that the solution that Pierre Poilievre is pushing for? So it's great rhetoric to stand up and flash and just say, oh, this is terrible. But I sensed a little bit of impatience and a bit of emotion, which is uncharacteristic for Carney, in his answer. And I think he was pushing back quite hard, saying, look, you don't seem to get the game here. We're dealing with something Canada's never had to deal with in the past, an American government that has decided that it's going to attack the Canadian economy. And we've got to use every tool in our toolbox to try to fight back.
It never fails to surprise me that you have mainstream media that is criticizing international relationships between Canada and America. So he's criticizing Mark Carney and Donald Trump. For whatever reason, he thinks it's somehow important to criticize Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition, who has, no power and no say in any of these things. I don't understand this. Trying to take his words and run them through hypothetical scenarios is just bizarre to me. I never cease to be surprised by mainstream media. Did I say that right? Mainstream media never fails to surprise me when it comes to criticizing people that aren't in power in order to prop up their liberal talking points. It's truly an art. It really is at this point.
Should there have been more guarantees maybe built into the language of this agreement?
Of course. I mean, when you look at Stellantis, for example, there you've got hundreds of millions of dollars and you've got billions that have gone to battery plants that we're not even sure are ever going to be built, or build batteries that are not going to be a generation behind. I mean, that's the problem when governments try to pick winners. And that is a huge problem. But here, it's not the same case. We have a steel industry that's really on the edge right now. It could fall off anytime. And if those jobs, and they're good jobs, and they maintain life in that whole community, if they were all wiped out, which they could have been, which is what Carney and the president of the company were both saying, then who would have been the winner? So, I mean, for the sake of some rhetorical flourish in the House of Commons, Pierre Poilievre is showing that he really, despite the fact that he tries to get the workers and the unions on side, doesn't seem to care a whole heck of a lot about workers or their families.
And CUSMA hearings continue today. How do you see this playing out for both sides of the border? Of course, the wild card in all of the negotiations is the U.S. President Donald Trump.
Well, I think, Scott, we've got to see this announcement. And, it was done in a podcast by one of Trump's key negotiators, but it's part of a game. It's the negotiation game. Oh, we don't really need this agreement at all. That's why we put in a clause saying it had to be renegotiated after 5 years. And maybe we'll have a separate deal with Canada and a separate deal with Mexico. Who knows? But we don't really need this stuff. Don't forget, a lot of this is going to take place against the backdrop of the midterm elections. There's going to be politics around it full time, but I do think that the Americans have every interest in continuing to have freer trade than less. Even though Trump says that his tariffs are just money falling from the sky into the U.S. Treasury, that's all money that's being paid for by U.S. consumers. That reality, and it's a simple economic reality, it's not Canada paying the tariffs, it's not even the companies, it's American consumers. And that's starting to hit home in terms of inflation. The cost of everything is going up in the States, and now Trump is even
That's factually incorrect. The cost of everything is actually coming down. President Trump just reversed this Joe Biden vehicle mandates, and now they can go back to they're going back to making smaller trucks, like really reliable trucks that you can buy for under $15,000. You have gas that is at a national average of $3 a gallon, which is insane. I don't know what that converts to in Canadian snow pesos per liters, but it's weird. It's weird that he's saying that the cost of everything is coming up in America when it's actually going down. Like if I'm not mistaken, we see this. I can easily Google the cost of things in America. The costs of goods and services are coming down in America. So I don't understand the weird gaslighting and the weird mis and disinformation, and also the weird jabs at political parties that have absolutely no power in Canada. Why isn't he talking about how the Bloc Québécois, this and that, or the NDP, this and that, or the Green Party, this and that? And, you know, the tariffs on Canada is absolutely at fault because of the Bloc Québécois. We all know this, right? Like, I don't understand the constant attacking of, well, I do understand it. I shouldn't say I don't understand it. I understand why they're doing it, because it's a liberal media and they want to keep liberals in power, and they want to keep the bashing of the conservatives, the subliminal messaging. I understand that, but I don't get how they're allowed to keep doing that. Like, aren't there rules and regulations in Canada, the CRTC or whatever, to block shit like this? I mean, to go on to government funded media and speak to a country and consistently take jabs at the underdog, it's just weird. It's weird when the underdog has no power, no nothing.
Musing about sending out checks, rebate checks to American families because of the tariff money that has come in. That's an admission of failure of his tariff policy. Smart people have been on this for a while, but Trump, of course, has been playing a game. He needed that money so he could give tax breaks to the richest people in the United States, like himself. That's what he used the money for. Now he's scrambling because he knows he's going to lose a lot of seats in that.
What is he talking about? He's giving tax breaks to people that make under $150,000 a year. Household income. That's what he's doing. What the fuck is Tom Mulcair talking about? He's going to be completely eradicating household income taxes because it's all being paid for by tariffs right now. This has been done throughout history. In fact, there's reasons there's good arguments to be made that life was better when there was no income tax and there was just tariffs. This is so weird for Tom Mulcair to straight up be lying right now.